I guess we can start now. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on FFIs, which stands for Flight and Flow Information for a Collaborative Environment. My name is Melissa Capidi. I'm the Operational Affairs Manager within the European Business Aviation Association, and I have the pleasure to moderate this exciting session today. Well, I have to say we have, I think, 35, 37 people, 37 of you joining us today. So it's great. And thank you once again for being here with us today. Stick with us. I promise it won't be boring because I'm joined today by two amazing speakers who will first give you a very comprehensive presentation. We have Magnus MOLBAEK, who is an expert for the SESAR deployment manager, and Donal LALOR, project manager, flight plan and flight data evolution for EUROCONTROL. Well, they are probably the real FFI's gurus. They manage to make even the trickiest details sound clear and almost easy to comply with. So they will contribute, of course, at different points during this session. So please drop any questions in the Q&A box, and we will go through them at the end with a Q&A session. And with so many attendees, I'm expecting some great questions. So now, Magnus, Donal, please show us how to solve these FFI's puzzles once and for all.
Thank you very much, Melissa, and good afternoon, everyone. So Magnus and I have a presentation, so I will start. I will just share my screen. Okay, so I think I'm sharing now. So okay, so I'll just start into the presentation and just quickly go through the agenda. So we will move between myself and Magnus as we make this presentation. We'll just go through some of the items we'll be introducing you to FFIs. Maybe some of you are aware of it. There's probably different levels of knowledge of FFIs here in this webinar. We'll go through some of the regulatory requirements related to FFIs. We'll talk about the EUROCONTROL implementation of FFIs. The B2B services through which the FFIs is available from EUROCONTROL. We'll talk about the implementation status of FFIs in Europe, and we'll talk about some lessons learned and some concerns and challenges that we have found with the implementation of FFIs and where you can find more information. So firstly, FFI, so what is it? It's a strange acronym. It stands for Flight and Flow Information for a Collaborative Environment. It is an ICAO concept, and it is intended to enable much more increased and data-rich information exchange between the ATM actors. It uses a global exchange format. So in Europe, we're using the FIXM format. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. It will replace ICAO Flight Plan 2012. So in Europe, this will start happening from the start of next year. And globally, it's expected to happen by 2034. It'll enable new items of information to be exchanged between the ATM actors, such as aircraft takeoff mass, 4D trajectories, air traffic management constraints, and so on. And we'll talk a bit more about that later on as well. And it's enabled by the provision of FFI services. And these are provided by FFI services units. And the FFI service unit for the IFPZ area is the EUROCONTROL Network Manager. So in the words of ICAO themselves, they define FFIs as information necessary for planning, coordinating, notifying flights exchanged in a standardized format between members of the air traffic management community. So some of you will probably have seen the acronym FFIs R1 and probably wondering what this means. So it refers to FFIs Release 1. And FFIs Release 1 introduces the first set of FFI services defined by ICAO. It introduces the common data format, starts addressing the limitations with Flight Plan 2012, and enables the exchange of information such as trajectories and aircraft performance to be shared among the air traffic management actors. And for now, FFI's Release 1 is focused on the pre-departure phase of flight. The next release will be FFI's Release 2, and this will involve the post-departure negotiation between operators and FFI services units on trajectory changes. It'll extend flight planning to during the flight execution, but it's important to note it requires first the implementation of FFI's Release 1, and finally it's still under development by ICAO. So just to show you a little bit about what an FFI's flight plan looks like, it is so as I said, it's in a FIXM format. It's in an X. This is just a screenshot of an XML file on the right showing an FFI's flight plan. As you can see from the scroll bar highlighted, there's a huge amount of information in comparison to the current flight plan 2012. And this really requires machine-to-machine interaction to be able to exchange these FFI's flight plan messages. So FFI's, it requires an information exchange model. So I've already talked about the FIXM model. So ICAO says that an information exchange model is required for FFI's that provides the structure and format of the required flight and flow data elements and enables the construction and exchange of standardized FFI's messages. So the screenshot on the previous slide just showed an FFI's flight plan message. So what we're using in Europe is FIXM, the Flight Information Exchange Model, and that provides XML schemas for all the defined FFI's messages. So next, why do we want to have FFI's? So ICAO, as I said, introduced the concept, and it has short-term aims and long-term aims. So in the short term, it's intended to address the limitation and constraints of the current flight plan mechanism. As I said, there's very limited the amount of information that can be shared in the ICAO 2012 flight plan. And then in the long term, it's to enable the transition to the fully collaborative environment where a flight trajectory will be shared and optimized during all phases of flight in what's known as trajectory-based operations. So in summary, we want air traffic management stakeholders to be able to understand each other's requirements. We want to enable collaboration. We want the flight plan messages to be scalable and flexible. They should be machine readable so that much larger amounts of information can be exchanged and understood. And we want to enable trajectory-based operations in the future. So when it's coming in, so globally, from an ICAO point of view, the implementation of FFI's is currently optional. But they have a recommendation to have a sunset of ICAO Flight Plan 2012 in November 2034. So it's anticipated that from that time on, ICAO Flight Plan 2012 will start to be removed globally. Then from a European point of view, in the European Union, we have the European Commission Common Project 1 regulation. And that mandates FFI's Release 1 to be implemented and for the exchange of FFI's flight plans and messages by the 1st of January 2026. And Magnus will go into more detail on the requirements of this regulation. So I talked about the FFI's services. There are 6 FFI services. I don't want to go into too much detail on these now, but happy to take any questions on them afterwards. But we have 6 services that have been defined by ICAO. And if you look at the ones on the right, the filing service, the flight data request service, and the notification service, they're pretty much provide similar functionality to what we currently have with ICAO Flight Plan 2012. So the filing service enables operators to be able to submit, update, and cancel their flight plans. Flight data request service enables stakeholders to be able to request specific flight data and is equivalent to the RQP and RQS messages that we have now. And the notification service is there to enable the notification of specific flight events. And for now, the flight events that have been defined are the arrival and departure notifications, which currently exist with Flight Plan 2012 as well. And then we have the brand new services. So the planning service. This enables an operator to be able to share early flight intent and The planning service can be used to assist the operators to determine the optimal route and trajectory for their flight. The trial service is similar, but it enables an operator to submit what-if scenarios and receive feedback prior to submission or update of their flight plan. And finally, the publication service enables operators and ANSPs to be able to obtain information relevant to operations and maintain awareness of changes. So as I said, the EUROCONTROL Network Manager is the FFI's services unit for the IFPZ. And we are the first services unit to be established and to be providing these services in the world. And for now, we are providing all of these services except the planning service. And all services are required by regulation except the planning service as well. So I've also talked about the new information that can be provided in an FFI's flight plan. So firstly, we have the globally unique flight identifier, also referred to as the GUFI. And this is defined by ICAO as an unchangeable data element associated with a flight that allows all eligible members of the ATM community to unambiguously refer to information pertaining to that flight. So it consists of 3 different items: the universally unique identifier, the UUID, a creation timestamp, and a namespace. So that's intended to ensure that each GUFI for each flight is it's virtually impossible that it can be duplicated by another flight. It's the responsibility of the operator or their designated representative to generate a GUFI for each flight. And it is used to identify individual flights from the aerodrome of departure to the aerodrome of their destination or their alternative. So for the purposes of GUFI allocation, a flight is considered to be an operation of an aircraft with a specified aircraft identification and a specified departure aerodrome from first submission of the flight plan until in blocks at the arrival aerodrome. And it's taking place once the aircraft has completed its planned operation at its destination aerodrome or its alternative aerodrome. So this is just to show you what a GUFI looks like. And as you can see, it's not intended to be able to use or exchange by operators. And it is really just used for machine-to-machine communication to ensure that both sides are using and referring to the correct flight. So the GUFI, it's used to associate the any received FFI's messages to the correct flight. It's required to include the GUFI. It's required to include the GUFI whenever updating or cancelling an associated flight plan. And if a flight plan is cancelled and a new flight plan is submitted, then a new GUFI is required. Some other items of information include the operator flight plan version. So this is a number that's included in each FFI's flight plan. And every time that flight plan is updated, that version number gets incremented by 1, and it's the responsibility of the operator to update that flight plan version every time they change the flight plan. We also have the flight-specific performance data, and these include climb and descent speed schedule and climb and descent performance profiles, and they should be included in an FFI's flight plan, and they enable air traffic management to be able to calculate a more accurate trajectory of the flight, and also the takeoff mass as well. This is a new item in the FFI's flight plan, and again used to enable much more accurate calculation of trajectories. Magnus will talk about the regulatory requirements associated with these items later in the presentation. And finally, we have the 4D trajectory. So we're moving away from provision of a route to a 4D trajectory. And this is a list of trajectory elements supplemented with 4D points expressed as latitude, longitude, time, and altitude. And that can be used to more accurately express where an aircraft is expected to be pre-departure. So in the example here, we have a flyby point at Sierra 2. And in the current flight plan 2012 route, you would just be able to put in Sierra 1, Sierra 2, Sierra 3. But in the trajectory, as the aircraft actually will not pass over Sierra 2, it'll actually fly over the Tango 3 point in the trajectory. That more accurate information can be provided in a 4D trajectory. Now I'll hand over to Magnus, and Magnus will talk about the regulatory requirements.
Yeah, thank you, Donal. Thank you to EBAA for being here today and letting us present here. I see there are questions already in the chat or in the Q&A. I answered one, and we will answer more of them in the end of the presentations, because we might, through the presentation, already answer some of them. But I will move on. Donal, you can take the next slide already. Okay. So we need to talk regulatory requirements in general here, and you need to consider 3 levels. We have the global, where you have the PANs and the SARPs, as well as a DOC 9965, which are the guidelines for the FFI's implementation globally. Remember, when we talk global guidelines, it's global, meaning they're very generic. So therefore, we also have regional. Here in Europe, we have CP1. CP1 is a regulation we'll speak more about today, and DOC 7030, which is the regional flight plan filing part of ICAO. And then we have the national. We have AIC, AIP, etc., that are national, that also will reflect the requirement for FFIs. Next slide. Perfect. So if we talk first the global ones, then FFIs have been implemented already, or has been implemented through the amendment of the annexes 2 and 10, and PANS ATM and PANS AIM, applicable from an ICAO perspective as of November 28th, 2024, meaning globally FFIs implementation have started as of that date, is their opinion. Consequential amendments to annexes 1, 6, 9, 11, 16, and PANS OPS, etc., have also been initiated. There's a new PANS ATM new chapter 17 about FFI services, and it's supported by DOC 9965, the FFI's manual. On top of that, no, Donal, go to the next slide. I will go to the on top of that. The regional one in Europe here, we have the CP1 and the ICAO DOC 7030, which are the supplementary procedures where proposal have been submitted to ICAO from a European side, amending the DOC 7030. On top of that is coming now from an EASA. Also, we have coordinated with the EASA, where the standardized European rules of the air have been updated or proposed updated to reflect the requirements that we are speaking about today. So we're trying to close the circle at least at regional level. National level is more difficult. Next slide, Donal. If we talk about the regulatory framework, and this is important and a very important slide that you will have to remember after today. First of all, everything we're talking about here, the regulation, the mandate, and what is going on, is not something that has been decided from a standalone Brussels institution. It has been developed and consulted with all stakeholders. It comes all the way from here, from the ATM master plan, the vision for the European digital sky. In there, in 2012, with the first master plan, there were essential operational changes identified, where what we see in the regulation today was some of it. The essential operational changes as per regulation became the pilot common project, Regulation 716/2014. That lasted until 17-ish, just before 2 years before COVID, I would say, where there was a regulation update process, and it took some years to update, where CP1 became the updated regulation, the new one, Common Project 1, the one you see here in the middle, Regulation 116 from 2021. That is the framework for SESAR deployment. Okay, so SESAR, Single European Sky Aviation Research, is where everything is coming from, and the deployment is this regulation. Now, when we deploy a regulation, it's difficult to understand the few lines of words that are in there. And therefore, we have, by regulation, also established a SESAR deployment program. There is a version 2024 as of September last year that are putting out specific requirements on all mandated stakeholders, including airspace users, on what and how you have to implement this also. Deadline for this is 31st of December 2025. So in a few days, if the clock were ticking, I think we are in the 60s of days left now before we reach the regulatory deadline. Next slide, Donald. Perfect. So who is mandated? We are the EU +2. So the dark blue color is the EU states. The light blue colors are Switzerland and Norway, who have an agreement with the European Commission. So they're also mandated through this. UK, as of this time, is not mandated, but are following closely and is also planning to implement. What is interesting is when we look at the list of affected stakeholders. So Network Manager, NM, has been mandated to provide the services that Donal. So it's not only something they do because they think it's a good idea, they were also mandated to do so. It is also in this scope that you see here on the left, it's all IFR GAT. So all airspace users flying IFR GAT are mandated to file EFPLs, includes also third country operators. So it's globally, we are talking about everyone flying in this airspace as of 1st of January 2026 are mandated to file an EFPL, move away from Flight Plan 2012. ANSPs on the ground are mandated, and some airports, we have 18 airports mandated, but that is not so relevant today for this webinar. Next slide. So what is important is that there is another regulation, Regulation 409, where they define the common projects. So the common projects are fully defined on how they should look like and when it can become a common project. And I think the first bullet is probably the most important one, that it shall aim and deploy in a timely, coordinated, and synchronous way the ATM functionalities. So it's an ATM functionality that we are deploying today. It's not only about a new flight plan format, it's about a new mechanism to exchange data. We're no longer going to use AFTN, AMHS, or whatever mechanism we've been using for decades. We're moving towards a B2B exchange mechanism, or SWIM, System-Wide Information Management, to exchange this flight plan data. Therefore, timely, synchronized, coordinated. Timely is probably going to be hard to reach at this stage because we are very close to the deadline. Synchronize is something we really have to work on, where if we look at the dictionary, it happens together, right time and expected way. So we're trying to really ensure harmonized deployment and a coordinated deployment of this in Europe. And we are also, of course, linking it globally, since we know that especially airspace users, you need global interoperability. It's not about only being able to fly in Europe, but it's actually everywhere you fly that it has to happen. Next slide. And there are some animations there also, Donal, in this. If you press a few, yeah, that's fine. No, too much, yeah. So this is basically how it looks like in Europe. We are fortunate. We have the network manager EUROCONTROL in the middle. They are providing the services that you saw from Donal already. And then the important thing is that there are new enhanced flight plan data that is to be provided. We'll talk more about that, and it will bring benefits. And therefore, it's important for you to see also that we're not asking airspace users alone to just provide data. We're asking the ground to actually use the data. Flight operation centers, and the ANSPs, sorry, the ANSPs are mandated to update their ground system to use the specific performance data, to use the 4D trajectory information that will be shared. So actually use the data. Likewise, Network Manager, EUROCONTROL, they will also use the data to improve their flow processes, etc. in Europe. So there will be benefits from this information. Next slide. So if you look at documentation, we cannot look at one document only. So we cannot deploy FFIs by looking at only the ICAO guidance. It's too generic. It's not meant to be an implementation step-by-step guide. We cannot look at the SESAR deployment program alone. We need to look at them all together. We have therefore written, and the document you see in the middle, the information exchange requirement for FFIs Release 1 in Europe, which states specifically what exactly is the data that is to be provided, and it compares with what you are providing. We've even built a big master file of an Excel where we compare, we go through every single field that is provided today versus tomorrow, and we are coordinating that beyond Europe to ensure that if you are mandated in Europe to file a specific data, it won't be rejected when you file it beyond Europe. Everything again is consulted in the different groups. This group that Donal is in charge of here is really a key group where all is being discussed. There has been concerns, mainly from the CFSPs, what performance data mean and why. Why do they have to share that? And we will address that also today so that you won't have the same concern. So next slide. What is mandated here specifically? So you need to provide an expanded route, trajectory, specific performance data, these three elements, as mentioned also by Donal, the global unique identifier and a operator flight plan version. What is important here is that today, the stakeholders on the ground, when they have to calculate their own trajectories or compute the trajectory in the ground system, they use the best guess available. It's called BADA. It's the generic database of generic aircraft performance data. So that is what they do, meaning when you calculate trajectory, when you file a flight plan, the ground will use different data to recalculate whatever you have filed already. That is what they do today. We're trying to even that out so that we all start using the same data. And the first step is to make this data available for the ground. Next slide. And there is an animation here also, Donal, I think. Yes, only one, yeah. So if we look at what the different data is, it is defined. So the climb and descent speed schedule is defined in the document, such as, and so is the takeoff mass and the performance climb and descent profile. The problem is that it is defined in a very generic manner, so we can't really fully understand what it means, and that is exactly why the CFSPs have expressed concerns. For example, we can take the performance and climb descent schedule, profile. It's a zero wind ISA, unconstrained climb and descent profile reflective of the flight capability and desired parameters. For them, that brings out a million questions. What that means, how it should be provided, what is it? Is it ISA 0? Is it ISA? There are many ISAs, and we need to really go further into that to redefine it in a more detailed manner for deployment here. What is also important is that in ICAO, it's optional, everything basically of the flight plan, where it's mandatory in Europe. Next slide. So if we look at the airspace users applicabilities, we are distinguishing a little between airspace users. So GAT, IFR, you heard it, they are mandated to file a full EFPL, where they have to file a trajectory, they need to file the performance data, takeoff mass, etc. So everything is mandated. We have also invented, I would say, the notion of a light EFPL, because as soon as we started presenting this to airspace users, military were the first one saying, we're not going to provide you any specific performance data. And therefore, there is a light EFPL where flight performance data, takeoff mass, expanded route, and 4D trajectory is optional. And today, no EFPL is required for OAT, so operational military traffic, especially here, and not for mixed OAT, GAT either. The same goes for VFR. We're not aiming at VFR at this stage. They don't impact the overall flows of traffic in Europe, and therefore, at this stage, they're not. There will be a time where they will also have to go there, and it's not too far away, actually. Next slide. Therefore, 1st of January, you must file a full EFPL using the NM services if you plan to operate in the geographical scope, so EU +2. And these are the mandatory elements that you absolutely have to file. Next slide, Donal. Light EFPL are for these, and it goes also still, it's still an EFPL as of 1st of January 26. And again, as I emphasize, it's not only about the flight plan format, it's also about the exchange mechanism, which in some cases is an even greater change than just providing the data, because we are moving into a different paradigm. Next slide. On the ground, so what is it going to be used for? We're really trying to look into it, but we know that different stakeholders on the ground have different use cases, different systems, different processes, and that all data that you have in your hands is really relevant. Therefore, network manager generically, because we don't have time to go more into detail today, they will use the climb and descent profiles to replace the values they use today in their trajectory computation. Just as I said, they use really generic values today. With this data from you, they can have a better trajectory and therefore can have a better flow of traffic in Europe. The flow managers, the local flow managers within each ANSP who have such a position will also use this in their flow system to improve their planning. So in some cases, this more detailed information can show and improve the planning so that they know how much flight they can have. Here they will be able to distinguish much more granularity between when a specific flight will enter a specific sector at a specific time, etc. Air traffic control will display the information for ADCOs and also replace the current used values of especially the speed schedules. However, today, the specific performance data is not yet being provided fully, and that causes some trouble on the ground implementation. Next slide. And that's you, Donal, I guess, here again.
Okay, thanks very much, Magnus. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the EUROCONTROL implementation of FFIs. So just to give you some background, we have the FPFD project. Apologies for the acronym. It stands for Flight Plan and Flight Data Evolution. And that's the project that I'm the project manager of. And that was established 10 years ago. And a subgroup, FPFD subgroup, was established about 2 years later in 2017. And that meets twice a year. And it has membership from ANSPs, from operators, from IATA, ATM system providers, and so on. And one of the main topics is the implementation of FFIs and exchange of ideas and talking about problems and so on regarding the implementation of FFIs. The EUROCONTROL Network Manager, as I've said, is the FFI service provider, or the FFI services unit for the IFPZ. And we provide all of the FFI services except the planning service. The services are provided via the Network Manager B2B services using request reply and publish subscribe communication models. And messages are exchanged using the flight information exchange model. So the FIXM provides, as I've said earlier, provides templates for all of the FFI's messages. And then operators and anyone using, exchanging these messages will construct the FFI's messages using these templates. The first flight using an FFI's flight plan to be carried out in operations was a Lufthansa flight from Munich to Hamburg on the 15th of December 2022. The flight plan was generated using the Lufthansa Systems Lido Flight 4D IFS and submitted to the Network Manager. And this followed very close collaboration between Lufthansa Systems, and EUROCONTROL at the time. So I'm showing you here a map of the IFPZ, and there's a good reason for this, because as we've already mentioned a number of times, the European Commission CP1 regulation mandates the implementation of FFIs in the EU member states, Norway and Switzerland. So you can see the IFPZ, the area where Network Manager provides the flight planning services, is a much larger area than this mandated area. So we have operators within the IFPZ that are not mandated to implement FFIs. We've got ANSPs that are not mandated to implement FFIs. And then we've got different implementations, different timeframes for implementations among the ANSPs that are mandated and operators as well. So for this reason, FFIs and Flight Plan 2012 will coexist for an extensive period in the IFPZ, and EUROCONTROL needs to be able to support this, and for that reason has implemented mixed mode operations to support both flight plans using translation and conversion. And I'll go into a little bit more detail in the next slide. So this is just to give you an overview of how the Network Manager mixed mode operations will work, or works now. So if you look at the red box, it is intended to depict the IFPZ, and within the IFPZ, we have the Network Manager as the FFI services unit for the IFPZ. We also have ANSPs within the IFPZ. The ones in blue are enabled for FFIs, the ones in green are not yet enabled. And then we have operators, EAUs and AAUs that are enabled for FFIs in blue, not yet enabled in green. So if we look at an operator that's already enabled for FFIs, they send an FFIs flight plan to the Network Manager, and that will be passed on to those ANSPs that are able to receive an FFIs flight plan. Then the Network Manager will translate the flight plan to the ICAO 2012 flight plan format, and this will be provided to the green ANSPs that are not yet moved to FFIs. Then you also have the option to select the translation and delivery service, where your FFIs flight plan will be translated and delivered onto ANSPs outside the IFPZ if your flight is continuing on to a destination outside of the IFPZ. So as I said, we are the only FFI services unit currently operational in the world, but in future there will be many more. Each state will be required to designate an FFI services unit. So in future, there will be more and more FFI services units outside of the IFPZ. And in that scenario, operators that are enabled for FFIs will need to send a separate FFIs flight plan to each one of those FFIs services units. And that's how it's foreseen at this point to work. Then we have, I suppose, the current scenario where the majority of operators are submitting Flight Plan 2012, so FPLs, to the Network Manager. These are passed on to ANSPs that are not yet moved to FFIs. And then we also use a conversion service where we convert those flight plans into FIXM format. And that's for the benefit of those ANSPs that are fully moved to FFIs and wish to receive all their flight plans in the FIXM format. So a flight plan that has been converted to the FIXM format, it doesn't imply any sort of compliance with FFIs. It's not an FFIs flight plan. It will not have the information that's mandatory to be in an FFIs flight plan, such as the GUFI and so on. It'll just be a Flight Plan 2012 in FIXM format. Okay, so we're also seeing that operators are moving to FFIs and they're sending FFIs flight plans, but then they have probably legacy systems and other systems other than the flight plan service provider for updating flight plans, for sending delay messages and so on. And we're prepared for that scenario as well. So where we have mixed mode messages for the same flight. So we see this as being unavoidable because, of all of these, there's probably a large amount of training required. We've a lot of legacy systems that are in use by different operators. And we can see it as being unavoidable, but it can lead to certain complications, such as the operator flight plan version that I referred to earlier. So in FFICE, the operator flight plan version is required to be incremented by 1 every time the flight plan is updated. But if you submit an FFICE flight plan and update it with an ICAO 2012 message, then that will not increment the operator flight plan version. And then from a regulatory point of view, while it'll work operationally from a regulatory point of view, it will imply non-compliance with the CP1. So we would advise to avoid it as much as possible and move fully to FFICE as soon as possible. Then we'll also have the scenario that you may be asking about where your flight originates from outside the IFVZ and what to do in this case. So I suppose the answers to this question are provided in various parts of PANS ATM. So PANS ATM in the new Chapter 17 that Magnus referred to, it says that an operator electing to use FFI services shall submit an EFBL to each FFI services unit concerned along the route of the flight. So in the case of the mandated countries, you will be required to send an FFI flight plan to the network manager. And then it says an FPL to each ATS unit unable to process an EFPL. So we can help you with that when I talked about the translation and delivery service. So then if you're departing from an aerodrome outside the IFPZ, not served by an FFI services unit, you are required, so as I said, required to submit an FFI flight plan to each FFI services unit and then comply with the requirements at the aerodrome of departure. And they should either be submit to FBL to the unit designated to serve the departure aerodrome, and then that unit will in turn distribute the flight plan to all the subsequent ATS units concerned with the flight. Or you will be required to address and distribute the flight plan to each concerned ATS unit, which is not FFICE capable. So that should be detailed by in the AIP at the aerodrome of departure. We are aware of certain countries that are requiring operators to only submit a flight plan at the aerodrome of departure, and obviously that is conflicting with this requirement here from at the top from PANS ATM, and we're trying to reach out to these countries to inform them about the CP1 mandate that we have in Europe, and to try align with the current realities of FFICE. So next I will move on to the EUROCONTROL Network Manager B2B services. So we have 2 platforms for the B2B services. We have the pre-ops platform, and this is intended to enable stakeholders to develop their FFICE application, to carry out testing, and to assess their readiness, and to enable my colleagues in the B2B office to assess their readiness before you move to the ops platform. And to get access to the pre-ops platform, you need to contact the EUROCONTROL B2B office, and you will need to have, depending on what setup you have with your flight plan service provider, you will either use their pre-op certificate, or you will require a pre-op certificate yourself. And then when you want to start using the FFI services operationally, you will require access to the B2B ops platform. So this requires a B2B ops certificate and can only be accessed and used following a period of testing and validation on the pre-ops platform. And that level of testing and validation required will depend on how you have implemented FFICE. So for example, if you're using a computerized flight plan service provider that has already achieved operational validation, past operational validation, that should make the process more straightforward than if, for example, you are developing your own solution or using a computerized flight plan service provider that has not yet passed through the validation process. So we see a number of options for operators to start using the FFICE services from the network manager. So you need to have a flight planning system that could generate and receive FFICE messages in a FIXN format. And you could have your own application, and in this case, you'd require your own NM B2B ops certificate. and you would have to develop and test that application on the NMB2B pre-ops platform. The most likely and most efficient solution, we think, would be to use a flight plan service provider application. And in that case, you may or may not require your own ops certificate, NMB2B ops certificate, because you may be able to use the CFSP's certificate, and that will depend on the arrangement that you have with the CFSP and that the CFSP has with Network Manager B2B. Excuse me. And finally, while this option is not available at the current time, it is possible in future that states will upgrade their ATS reporting offices to be equipped for FFIs, so that in that case, the ARO would be your designated representative, and that you would be able to submit a flight plan through the ARO. And in that case, we don't foresee that you would require an NMB2B ops certificate. And as I said, that depends on the availability of that service in each particular state. And at the current time, as far as I'm aware, this service is not available in any of the mandated states. So just a quick go through of the what's needed in NMB2B. So applications need to be tested and validated on the pre-ops platform. To access that, you need a pre-ops certificate. Access to the ops platform follows an operational validation, and full validation takes approximately 30 days, but can be reduced to a period of approximately 2 weeks if the system that you're using has previously been validated. The estimated time from the receipt of a pre-op certificate to operational validation is currently about three months. And as I said previously, a certificate may not be required by operation, and validation can be simplified depending on your arrangement with a CFSP. So I guess we'll be sharing this presentation, but there is an email address here, and further information is available on the EUROCONTROL website on the NMB2B services. So now we'll move on to the implementation status, and I'll let Magnus take over the presentation.
Thank you, Donal. And I will accelerate so we can handle the questions that are there also. Every year we monitor the state of deployment here, and we develop an implementation roadmap. You are all welcome to get that. Just reach out by email, and we can ensure that you have that, or you can go through Melissa. She will also have it for sure. This is the last year, and we need to, of course, augment the number of airspace users. But as you see, these are the stakeholders who say they will be done within the mandate. That is a low percentage of the flight. I think it represents 40% of the flights by 25. But we are actually a little blind to the rest, including business aviation. We don't really know where you stand, when you will be ready, etc. For that, it's important to note, as it is a mandate, we will be monitoring this also post the deadline, where we will be seeing who is providing a flight plan 2012 versus an EFPL. Therefore, please reach out so you can be part of this monitoring process so that we can get you in and we can reflect your plan so that we can avoid any consequences of non-compliance eventually. Next slide. Legal concern, it's not so relevant here in the status actually, but nevertheless, there was a legal concern that was expressed by CFSPs about the provision of data, but it hasn't been confirmed, and it is mandated to provide this data. Next slide. The status from the platform, number of, if we look at the last 10 days, I guess we go 10 days ago and now, but number of EFPLs that was submitted or flight plan request was approximately 79,000. Of these, if we look at the performance data, 3.9% provided it from those airspace users she, and the performance profile was slightly higher, and both, which is mandated, was even lower. Therefore, we need to get the data, because if not, we cannot have the ground to move on this also. So as you can see, we have access to data, and we will be monitoring what and what is not being provided. Next slide. Therefore, if we talk about trajectory-based operation, where the aim is to fly as close as possible to the user-preferred route, we need to start seeing this performance data being shared. We need to start seeing you as airspace users file this information, because it will bring benefits to you. Next slide. Pragmatic approaches for you as airspace users: start filing EFPL and file with every data you have available now, and complete within 26 to provide all the mandated. So if you don't have a solution for everything, then still provide what you have in your EFPL. You will be able to go through your ops validation. And the ground, those who are implementing now, they are already developing systems. They cannot develop systems to use all the data because it's not available, but they're developing system with what is available, and that is takeoff mass primarily today. For ANSPs that are mandating new ATC or implementing new systems, they will have to develop systems that also have that capability naturally from the beginning. Next slide. Concerns is not only filing an EFL, there are also other systems involved. This is important for you to notice also. There are old workarounds that will have to be removed because the need for these workarounds will be eliminated with this. Operational impact to be assessed. We have lessons learned from Lufthansa already. There will be a long period of mixed mode globally, especially, but even in Europe. Ownership of trajectory is something also that we're discussing, where there will be agreement to ensure that the data is used only for the right purposes. We're only talking about a couple of months away, the deadline, and 2034, we didn't discuss it, is the decommissioning or the sunsetting of the legacy format globally. So that is an important date, that we're not only talking about a new format now, but a removal of the old format. Next slide, Donal. Lessons learned. You, Donal, I guess, there.
Okay, thanks, Magnus. So yeah, I'll quickly run through it as well just to leave some time for the questions. So some of the lessons learned just at a very high level. You probably experience this yourselves. There's a clear need to be clear in the communication, especially regarding the regulatory requirements, and especially to operators outside of the European Union who may not have the same ready access to information as you may have within Europe. We're seeing some issues with regard to sharing of information. So we have limited reporting from operators on their readiness for the CP1. And we're also seeing, as Magnus has said, some difficulties regarding the sharing of the flight-specific performance data, and we're trying to work through that. I've already pointed out that we are seeing problems as well, where operators are using legacy systems, or intend to continue to use legacy systems to send ICAO 2012 flight plan messages. So this will prolong the mixed mode time, so that network manager will need to be able to continue to support flight plan 2012 messages. And it just introduces complications when you've already sent an FFI flight plan. And then also we can see there's a clear need. The B2B process, as I've talked about, it can be a comprehensive process. It's required. The process is actually approved by EASA, so there are certain requirements. It's a very detailed process, and this requires early planning and early communication to work your way through this testing and validation certification process. So further information, I don't know, Magnus, do you want to talk about the Common Support Initiative?
Very briefly, just we have a common support initiative, NMSDM, from March 23, where we are developing, among others, the roadmap and other document to support the implementation. But I don't think it's more relevant to go into more details here. So Donal, continue. And I can take this also. AIC, quickly, that this is the latest update. All countries except those in red have published an AIC that requires you also to file EFPLs when flying over their airspace. Next slide. That you, Donal?
So you can find more information on FFICE, on the Eurocontrol implementation of FFICE. We have a FFICE webpage, very easy to find, eurocontrol.it/FFICE. And you can find various items of information there, explanatory video, information about our implementation of FFICE, frequently asked questions and so on, further reading, etc. We also have a webinar. We've delivered a webinar through the Aviation Learning Centre, and that's available on their website, the recording of that webinar, and it is worth as an initial starting point if you want to find out more information about FFICE and our implementation of FFICE. And then finally, we have an FFICE support email address. Again, very simple. Again, it's ffice@eurocontrol.it, and we would welcome your queries related to FFICE to that email address. So that concludes our presentation.
We have a few questions here in the chat that I will go through briefly here. Also, I answered most of them already written in the chat, but there is one here saying, does FFIs affect the distance that is used to calculate overflight fees? So my take on this, I understand this is important. There has been a couple of questions on this, is that what it can affect is that a generic flight plan can affect what country you are not flying over. So by having more specific, more detailed information, then we will the line between airspaces can be better calculated than it is today. Today it's very generic when what is being filed, and then it's difficult to know where you exactly are flying. So I think it can actually, it could help you in this process, especially of maneuvering where you want to fly it, how long you want to be in a particular airspace, etc. So I think it will bring benefits on that side. I never even thought of that before. I don't know, Donal, if you have anything on that one.
No, I was invited to provide a presentation on FFIs to the route charges office, to one of their groups earlier this year, but I would suggest that any questions specific to the route charges, really it's probably best should be addressed. I think they have an online form to address these questions to them, so they are aware of FFIs and any changes that FFIs may impact on that. I think that's probably the best forum to address those questions.
Yeah, great. Next question. How can we have access to pre-ops trial service to test flight planning systems and route validity before filing? Donal, do you want to take that one?
I can take that one. So if you have a computerized flight plan service provider that enables you to access the FFI services, they should provide the trial service as one of those services that's available through their system. And then through that, you will be able to try out different routes. And even if the network manager, if the route is rejected, the network manager will provide you back with a network manager calculated route. So it's quite a useful service to be able to use, but that's how you will get access to the trial service.
Yeah, and be aware that some CFSPs have decided to prioritize the filing service first and not the trial service. So they're taking a stepwise implementation approach to this. Next one is, how will the operator be notified of a flight plan change? Will the NM portal provide any alert indicator? So there was another question also on the NM portal, whether it will be possible to also have the trial service there. I think especially in the NM portal or the NM UI, I guess they call them now. Donal, I don't know if you have any details, but I think we would have to come back with you to answer that in details. We know that there is an updated NM UI now available for AROS, but not for rest of the airspace users at this stage. Donal, I don't know if you have more details.
For FFIs, the way that this was intended to work is through the publication service, the data publication service. So when you submit an FFI's flight plan, you will receive two messages back at the same time from the network manager. One is the submission status, which is the acceptability of the message, and then the filing status, which will be the operational acceptance of the message. If there is a change to the filing status, because the flight plan will be reevaluated every 30 minutes, I think for 12 hours before the EOBT time, you will receive an updated filing status, and you should receive that through the data publication service. So you'll need to subscribe to that in FFIs.
Yeah, great. And there's one last one that came in now, or two more. Do you know if Jeppesen jet plan is already certified? So I also had one similar on ForeFlight. So ForeFlight, Jeppesen, they work closely together. We know that both Jeppesen and ForeFlight, they're fully engaged in this, but none of them so far have passed their operational validation, as far as we know, at least on these two.
ForeFlight has passed through.
Okay,
So
they have
their
passed
first
it
customer,
recently,
yes.
so I need to correct the answer. So ForeFlight has passed it, Jeppesen not yet. But if you contact your CFSP directly, they will know exactly where they stand, what actions you have to take and not take on this behalf. And then last one was, why is takeoff mass included in the EFPL?
The
Or in the
FPL or the
FPL?
EFPL?
Yeah, that's the question. Is it EFPL or FPL? So I guess there was a possibility to already include it in the FPL. It was not done always, but it in some cases it was, but it was never used beyond Network Manager. The takeoff weight or mass that was provided in the FPL 2012 with FFIs and EFPL, it will be provided also to the NSP for the usage in the air traffic control systems.
I guess we went through all the questions then.
Yes, no more questions as I can see it. Yeah.
Well, thank you to both of you. Actually, for the attendees online, if you still have some questions you would like to address to both Magnus and Donal, please feel free to share it with me. I will send it to both of them, and I will share the answers together with the recording and the presentation on our website. So that's something interesting to mention. Well, 404, congratulations, we made it, even enjoyed it. So thank you all for the very relevant questions, and a big thank you to Magnus and Donal for their support. Do not forget, you can always replay the video on our website. I will enclose the presentation, as I just said. And very last detail I'd like to share with you is our next webinar taking place next week on November 6th. The topic is huge as well, Part IS implementation, because someone spoke about the Part IS within FFIs. So make sure to join us for another exciting discussion. And I wish you a great afternoon, and stay tuned for more EBAA events. Thank you to all of you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.